Recorded Books and One Click Digital present Straight Shooter, a Ralph Compton novel by Marcus Galloway, narrated by Lee Aaron Rosen.
Chapter 1. Iowa, 1887. Wes Cavanaugh robbed banks. Even when he was a child, that was all he'd ever wanted to do. When his cousins would pretend to be soldiers fighting great battles, or knights from fairy tales slaying dragons, he was always pretending to force innocents to reach for the sky as he held them at gunpoint and took all of their hard-earned imaginary cash. While growing up, he was a likable enough young man. That changed once all the hard work in his daddy's field and barn granted him the muscular bulk that allowed him to truly assert himself. When he was able to knock Larry Drangle onto his back with one punch to the jaw, Wes realized his dream to become a bad man. After that, he learned to shoot, honed his riding skills, and listened to everything his uncle had to say about tracking. His family didn't much appreciate the turn their boy had taken, which was why so many of them tried to steer him in another direction. But none of them were a match for the one true skill Wes was given at birth. He was a natural-born liar. Wes's ability to appear earnest as he was taught how to ride gave his father hope when, in actuality, Wes was planning on riding away from the law in a rush. When his uncle taught him the fine art of tracking, Wes stored the knowledge away so he wouldn't slip up when he was the one being tracked by a posse or two. When he was being taught to shoot, well, there was no way even he could hide the joy that rushed through him when firing a pistol. Once he had what he thought he needed to put his childhood dreams into motion, Wes stole his father's .38, saddled his horse, and struck out on his own. He was 17 and full of beans, but that didn't stop him from attempting to rob the first general store he could find. It was a disastrous affair that began with Wes storming in and talking tough. The shopkeeper played along until he could get to his shotgun, and when he fired a barrel at Wes, the young man's true education began. He barely escaped with his life, but his thieving instincts were strong enough for him to snatch a blanket and a handful of stick candy on his way out, simply because they were the only things he could reach. On that day, Wes learned what it felt like to truly have his neck on the chopping block. He also learned what happened when a man left the comfort of his family's land and strayed from the light of the law. It was cold in those shadows, which was why he quickly learned the value of gathering other like-minded souls as partners. Although the small group immediately thought of themselves as a gang, it took some time to prove themselves as such. A string of botched robberies and a handful of small successes funded their ride. But even if he hadn't stolen a penny in those days, Wes would never have looked back. It was too late for that. His course was set, and he took too much pride in his chosen profession to abandon it so easily. And so, after putting 11 years of theft under his belt, Wes Cavanaugh might not have been as notorious as some, but he was prosperous enough to keep riding the trail he'd set himself upon when he first galloped away from his daddy's barn. However, riding in a large gang wasn't necessarily a good idea. More men meant more loose ends when things took a turn for the worse. On those occasions when a gang had to scatter and lie low, more men meant better odds for the law to find one and make him talk about the others. Also, having fewer men meant splitting the profits of a job into fewer shares. Any one of those things was a good enough reason for Wes to trim down the gang and be more selective in his company. When he rode across Iowa in the fall of 1887, Wes did so with a man who called himself Mose Robbins. Wes never asked if Mose was his proper name or if it was short for something else, because he didn't care. Mose was tough enough to stand firm in a fight, he could shoot straight, and he wasn't smart enough to double-cross his partner with any degree of subtlety. Most important, Mose was as loyal as a dog. He also had the same number of fleas living in the thick mass of coarse whiskers sprouting from his chin and upper lip. Although Wes didn't exactly tend to his appearance by doing any more than running an occasional hand over his close-cropped brown hair or splash some water on his face to keep the thick sideburns in place, he looked like a dandy compared to Mose. Where Wes was lean and muscular, Mose was thick as a bear preparing for hibernation. Where Wes
Sample complete. Ready to continue?